Okay, everybody, thank you all for being here. We're going to take some time now to meet our visiting artist, Paulina Swietliczko, and she has shared her paintings with us. She was born and raised, they grew up in Poland, has her master's degree or magistrate degree. So
well, it's this is, I mean, if you translate it, that would be master's in fine arts, yes, in painting.
And she earned that at in Warsaw at the Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw.
Yes.
Is that right? She moved to the United States in 2005. Lived in California for several years, working in teaching in community college there. So she's familiar with the community college experience. Moved to Roanoke around 2012.
That's right.
Has been living there, participating in the arts there, various shows such as the biennial at the Olin Hall in Salem at Roanoke College. We had a show of her work last year, but we weren't able to have a gathering like this. We weren't able to have a reception like this. So I invited her back. She works so much, she creates so much work that she was able to, in a year, produce a whole other body of work for us to look at, completely different new paintings for us to see. And she's, I think, not to step on what you were maybe going to say, but she's sort of navigating the world of adulthood and responsibilities of parenthood and being a member of, you know, the regular community, but also keeping a continuing to make art, and that's a pretty tricky thing to navigate, actually. And when you become an artist, that's one of the challenges, is that you want to have this full life of all kinds of conventional things people want, but you also have this other idea that you want to pursue. And so she's been pursuing that. We can ask her about that whole experience as well as the specifics of some of her paintings. Most of what's here is oil paintings, mostly?
Yes, except for one, the big one, the sink is acrylic, yes.
So what I would like for you to do is to join me in welcoming Paulina, and please think of something that you find curious about these paintings. These paintings are both familiar and unusual, I think. So consider those kinds of things and think about some questions that you might have. And also, since you are all painting students, there may be some technical things that you see her doing that you'd be curious to ask about as well. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Paulina Swietliczko to speak with us and meet with us. Thanks, Paulina.
Thank you. So the subject matter in my paintings is very various. Like last year I was showing plein air paintings. This year I have a whole bunch of still lifes, and right now I'm working on portraits. So like I'm not one subject artist. I really like painting everything, and I know that some people, like, we expect from artists producing the same, I mean, being consistent, right? Consistency. Yeah. So like some people might see it as being inconsistent, but so like I'm trying to juggle all those different subjects, and yes, like you said, it also maybe my choices come from my lifestyle. I am a mom to 2 young girls, and I'm a wife, and I'm trying to be part of the community where I live. So it's just juggling all those things. I can't put my painting on the side and wait till my kids grow up. So sometimes I jump from subject to subject or produce like one. So like these still lifes, most of them I painted last year during the pandemic and lockdown, when my kids were in their bedrooms working on their laptops, virtually learning, and so I had to be available to help them because like one was 9, the other 12, so they needed parents, like occasionally, to help them to scan something, to help them to read something, to understand some instructions. So I couldn't go to my studio, and I wasn't always able to go outside to do plein air painting. So I set my planner easily in my kitchen, and I started painting objects in my kitchen. So like our kitchen is always full of food and everything because people come and leave their papers, mail, food, everything. Kids leave their toys, so that's what I was painting. So like, except for that big painting, that painting was painted in 2008 when I was a mom to a newborn, my first child, and I was trying to juggle being a teacher, being a mom, and switching with my husband. He was also teaching logic at Fresno State and finishing his master thesis. So we were just switching all the time. When I was working, he was staying with our baby and the other way around. So at night I had some time to paint, and I was painting again in my kitchen. And that one, that painting is done in acrylics because at that time I didn't want to have any toxic chemicals in my house where I had a newborn. So I go like away from still lifes and I go back to still life. I really like still life. I know it's not the most wanted subject. It's often seen as something less important in the arts, but it's also like, I love painting objects around me. It's a great practice to just paint what you see. And some of them were painted at night when my kids were asleep, and some were painted during the day when I had like 2 or 3 hours.
So you mentioned plein air, and that's painting outside.
Yes.
And the last, if you were, I don't know, some of you were in school here last semester or last year, and maybe saw them. So plein air painting is a really different kind of painting because you actually take all your stuff outside. So she was painting outside, and there's a lot of challenges involved with that. But that was maybe when well, you were painting in the snow too. You painted in the snow. You painted all winter, and but then as you know with COVID, everybody's world kind of contracted a little bit, and we found ourselves kind of unable to do certain things. It's interesting now. I understand the inclusion of this larger painting, and it's kind of interesting because it ties together the theme of sort of the theme of the name of the show is a painting for dinner, because you're painting in your kitchen, and that kind of ties back. So this was something that you had done back in what you said 2008. And it was a larger scale. So we paint still lives in class, and so maybe you could say something about the value of working from just direct observation of objects.
Yes, so the easiest way is to take a photograph, and there is nothing wrong with that, and then paint it. But the reason why I paint from observation is because when I painted from photographs for a long period of time, I noticed that I started just, it flattened the way of me seeing things. So I went back to observing things when you have three-dimensional world all around you, and in your head you have to produce that flat image. So it's a just different experience. So once it's good to go back and forth. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying different approaches. Sometimes I paint from observation, then I go back to photo references and to my own sketches and see how that affects my work. Mm-hmm. And because those are very different experiences, because when we paint, it's not only recording an image, it's your experience, what you think, what you feel, and then you can really see it in your painting, all those experiences that you have while working. So, and it depends on your approach too. So it's good to do all kinds of experimenting, all kinds of things like observing things and trying to draw and paint them, photographing things and painting trying all those things all together, it just makes your experience more like rich.
Yeah, I have a question. So before this one, you were doing the plein air, which when you're doing plein air painting, it's really a very temporal thing, right? Like you're set up and you're kind of chasing the shadows, right?
Yes.
So if you set up your plein air station in your kitchen, did you do the same experience, or did you kind of just do it whenever you wanted over time and work in the shadows how you felt like it?
Well, it was a very similar experience. It was just plein air in my kitchen, basically. Even I was carrying with me the same easel. So again, chasing shadows and lights, because the light is changing so quickly. So those objects start looking very different very quickly, like that painting with the teapot and that cerulean mug and a lemon. I painted it later during the day when the sun was going down, and I had to finish it very quickly because very soon it got very, very dark and I wouldn't see anything.
So, would a lot of these paintings be single session?
Yes, so
okay.
pretty much all of them are like single session, about 2 to 3 hours. And some of them, yes, I had to rush because the light was changing. So like some of them, like the sink on both sinks here, the pink gloves and the kind of green lid, those were painted at night. So you see different light, and you can kind of feel the artificial light when you look at that. It's different.
Yeah. And of course, the painting small is helpful because you can finish that.
Yes, I can finish quickly.
Yeah. And sticking with that, there are special challenges that emerge when you paint that small.
Yes.
So what kind of things do you think?
The first thing is composition. Like I have to fit 1 or 2 or few objects on that very small size paper, because this is all artist paper. And so I can either focus on a detail, on a big object, and make it kind of a composition for my painting, or a few small objects. So like painting small is not necessarily always faster, because you really have to think about how you're going to arrange objects and then the colors.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you. That's such a really good response. That the first thing becomes even more critical is composition. Because when you pull the edges in like that, what you do is then everything that's included becomes so important. I mean, I particularly like this grapefruit with the frying pan. It's really an interesting composition because you have this big, larger object of the frying pan, but because it's just iron against black, it becomes really just merges into one shape. So that your immediate shape response is this pink grapefruit, but there is something else happening there that's actually large and weighty. And because I really do admire the compositions of all of them, but quite especially in the small ones, because I know that that's a special challenge. I think it's also interesting to look at these and think about your energy into them now, knowing that they're pretty much all single session, that the small ones then are kind of more concentrated, and the larger ones are sort of more open feeling. Like I'm thinking about the pears, feels a little more open.
Yes.
And then but in the small ones, there's this concentration of work, and that makes sense to me in thinking about that. The amount of time may be actually very similar amount of time for both. So that's interesting. Yeah.
I have another kind of odd question, I guess. When you sit down to do these, do you have in your mind kind of the look that you're going for? Because I'm kind of comparing in my mind this one with I think that's a radish, or cabbage, and the 3 peppers, and then have tomatoes. Those three kind of have a very different feel to them. That this one is almost simple enough to be abstract, right? It's not quite, but it's almost. And then the one with the peppers is almost photorealistic with the way that you've done the lighting and the shadows. And then the one with the tomatoes is also different because you have your brush strokes are really part of the composition and part of what you're saying with that piece. So do you sit down and plan that? Do you sit down and say, I want to do more photorealistic or I want to do more abstract, or does it just kind of come?
No, I don't think about a style. What I do is I like objects like with a cabbage and then squash. I was cooking dinner and I stopped. Like I cut my squash in half and I decided it was so beautiful, I stopped doing what I was doing and I started painting. So usually I just start with sketches. So I do a lot of small sketches, and those sketches inform me what's interesting for me in those objects. And usually I just focus on shape and then lights and shadows and the colors. And I go from there. And it's kind of like chasing unicorns. I mean, I don't really know where it's going to take me. It's more like my intuition leads me where it's supposed to. So it's all experiment.
Yeah.
So are all your paintings like all the subjects you chose in, were they already like that in your kitchen, or did you rearrange some things?
Sometimes I rearrange things, but usually they're there. Sometimes there are too many things that they don't have to be in the painting, and I skip them. Sometimes there's too much mess, like spilled coffee on the counter. I don't really need to paint that. So, yes.
But surely you move things around a little.
Yes, I move things around, but sometimes like with the sink, things were already there.
Yeah.
Yes, but I rearrange. Like I said, sometimes there are unnecessary things that I don't need to paint or I'm not interested in painting. Because I'm not trying to show things exactly in a realistic way or a photographic way. I'm just trying to create interesting picture.
Right. That's an interesting. That's a really interesting difference that I don't think people always quite understand. I like to say in drawing and painting class that ultimately, you're not making these things. You're making a picture, and that's where you kind of that's where if you want to term it that, your responsibility is when it comes to the picture, because those things will be gone.
Yes.
And the picture remains, so the picture is the thing that you're really making. And I think that especially people who haven't made art like that, I don't think they always understand that, that there is a difference. There's a difference between recording what's there versus making a painting.
Yes, and there is also a feeling like with the pink gloves. It was late, around like 11 p.m. The house was quiet, everybody was asleep. And then I looked at that and I thought, work done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I put my dishwashing gloves on the edge of sink, and there are more objects, probably more sponges like yellow and green, and I didn't need them because I saw that there is that pink bottle, and for compositional reasons and coloristic, I just liked all those three elements that were pink, so I removed the rest. But the feeling that what I felt when I looked at that sink at that moment is there.
Yeah. Right.
So yes, some of those objects are there for me, and they bring some kind of feeling that I feel when I look at them, and that's, I think, where I'm going when I'm trying to show that feeling.
That reminds me of something you said earlier that I know that I have. Like, I can look at a picture that I made from a couple of years ago, and I can look at it and think, oh yeah, I know what I was thinking then. And it's not that I was thinking of the lemon.
Yes.
It's that while I was painting the lemons, I was thinking about, I don't know,
Yes.
house payment or
Yes.
something complete. But I can look at that picture
Yes.
and I can think of what I was thinking when I made it because of that investment of kind of psychological investment.
Yes, and it's amazing that every painting is kind of like a diary from
Yeah.
artist's life.
Uh-huh.
Each of them brings different story of different time, small things happening, like this coffee maker and the pepper. I remember it was my husband and my anniversary, and we really wanted to go for a hike that day. Just kids would finish schoolwork early, would just jump into the car and go to Peaks of Otter. It was like mid-October. We wanted to see the foliage, we wanted to see fall colors. So I was rushing to finish it, and then we went on our anniversary trip. So yes, whenever I look at this painting, I remember that day and that afternoon.
That's a great thing that that painting provides too. Is that it becomes a sort of repository of your thinking and your memory. That's really interesting, and it goes. Yeah. So you have this rich kind of record of all that, and it's not even what it's a picture of.
No.
It's what's in the picture from you doing it.
So yes, it just brings all those memories, emotions, just small elements of my life.
Great. Please, does anyone else have a question? Yeah.
I would like to know the story behind this one, because that is one foreboding that
The duck looks ominous, huh?
It's also because I painted this picture right before the sunset, and it was disappearing in the shadow, and I wanted to. So yes, it was all those objects were sitting on my microwave, and it's kind of dark there. So that's why it looks the way it looks. And it's a funny object because it's my vegetable scrub, but it's a ducky and my kids love it. And it's kind of not painterly object, kind of cartoonish. So I wanted to see, but it's yellow like the lemons, so I included the ducky with the lemons.
Yeah.
Kind of scary ducky.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Was it challenging when you first started to paint? Was it hard?
Well, it's always challenging. It's always a challenge because you don't know what you'll end up with. But you have to give yourself permission to mess up. So yes, it's always a challenge, now and 10 years ago. But it's also a lot of fun.
Now that's also though, so many of the students here are probably, how many of you are painting this semester for the first time you really ever painted? So we've got some people that have really never painted before. And I wonder if you can think back to when that was true for you and what was particularly, maybe something particularly challenging as a new painter.
Yes, I remember the time when I was painting with oils for the first time, and I remember squeezing dark colors. And I couldn't really see, was it carmine? Was it like alizarin crimson? Was it some kind of Prussian blue? I couldn't tell because the colors were really, really dark. So I would use any of them for the dark. And then I would say, oh my goodness, what I ended up with? It was too warm for the shadow, right? Or too cold or whatever. So then it made me start thinking about temperature, that colors have temperature. So like I started mixing a little bit of those dark colors with white to see what they really are and what temperature they have. Yeah. So
yeah, that's definitely true. We start with a color study.
Yes.
That and definitely that's true. Especially those very dark, the crimsons and the even ultramarines and
yes.
Yeah, some of those colors, and you mix them together, and so often students are like, well, this just looks black. But then you have to mix it with with other things. But another way, so yeah, once you start putting white in it,
Yes, you
for
can
this
see.
in the color study, you can start to see that the difference between, you know, maybe a crimson and a caramel.
Yes.
So that's a tricky problem. Now, you know, and did you also find that your visual acuity sharpened? Like, do you feel like you became better able to see that over time?
Yes, I'm definitely more aware of color now. So like I always use color in kind of intuitive way, but it's also good to understand color and the temperature and do like try color by mixing it on the side before you start painting with it.
And I remember you said that about working from photographs. 'Cause a lot of people, when we talked before another time, you said that you began to realize that your paintings were taking on photographic color.
Yes.
It wasn't your color anymore, it was photo color.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's, can you describe that difference? I mean, that's kind of tough.
Yes, so like when I paint from life, I kind of memorize those colors that I see in nature. And they are in me, and there's like really wide range of those colors because you can see pretty much everything when you go outside or when you're inside, but when you're observing really well. But when you look at photographs, those colors are limited by light, by filters, whatever you're using to take a photo. So you are just limited to what camera was showing to you. And minus your experience when you see colors, experience colors when you go outside or just when you look at like inside in the studio at colors.
And we all personally have a kind of interpretation of color too.
That too. And I noticed like right after I graduated from college, I was painting from photographs. I was painting large pictures of people, and I was using black and white photographs, and I completely made up colors. And I didn't have any problems with that because I painted for such a long time from observation that I kind of expected like what color it would be. And then after painting for many years from photographs, I kind of lost it. And I had to like relearn it.
That's interesting. So, yeah, I think that a lot of times, so using photo references, and we've had talk to some students who want to do that, that's the way I always like to phrase that. They're photo references. They're references that can help you to remember certain things or capture certain aspects of the scene that are helpful. But that's different from painting the photograph. And some people just paint the photograph. And a big part of that for me is that the hardest part of making a painting, well, a very difficult part of making a painting is that you have to translate three-dimensional reality into it, and you have to translate that into, and that's part of the artistry. That's where your humanity comes in. That how do you make those decisions to make that? And when you do it mechanically, when you work directly from a photograph, you're allowing a machine to solve that problem for you. And then you're going not from 3 dimensions into 2. You're just going from 2 to 2.
Yes.
And there's so much lost, I think, in that, in not doing that, because, and it's both interpretive, but it's also, some sort of psychology. It's also just the fact that the human beings are reconciling 2 different views of the world from 2 different eyes, whereas a camera is a single lens, and it just gives you, like, it's like walking around with
Yes, so you mean like there's a difference between making a copy of a painting than using it as a reference, right? Yes. But I know that many artists are using photos and paint exactly in photorealistic style, and they even use Photoshop to. So what I do in my sketches, some artists do like using Photoshop, so they do all those kind of combination, like they try different things and do sketches in Photoshop instead, which is completely foreign to me. Like maybe because I started from just live drawing, live painting, And then later on in life, I used photo reference to make a painting. But I know that there are many artists who just do it directly and paint in photorealistic style. Like there's an artist, Lee Price, and she paints herself, usually eating because she has eating disorder. And it's amazing what she does, but I think it takes many years of still learning and having different experience, not only making copies, but also experiencing painting and drawing from life.
Right, because the photograph is not taboo, or even using Photoshop is not off limits. It's just that it's sometimes we don't recognize that it limits us.
Yes, it does.
In certain ways, and if you know that, and you know that how you're using it, that's one thing.
Yes.
But you don't want to just simply be in a situation of copying the effect.
So yeah, you probably need that different experience, different approach.
Anybody else? Questions? Any questions? No questions. How? So you were teaching at a community college in Fresno?
Yes, in Fresno. Yes.
And
Ridley, there was a tiny town at the foothills, and I was teaching another painting and drawing class there too.
So we're here in Virginia, and now it's California. Do you think, is there anything that stands out different from that experience?
I would probably have a lot of examples first year when I moved.
Right. Okay.
I kind of got used to, but yes, culturally, there is a lot of Hispanic population. So over there, where we lived, and here it's a very different situation.
Okay.
So that, but also, even Fresno is not a large city, but I had very mixed population, people from all over the place, really.
Okay. And do you have a question?
That's actually around from where I'm from. I just moved here from California.
Oh, did you?
From Fresno.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
We live 4 hours from there.
Oh, where did you live?
We lived in Monterey County.
Oh, okay, so
First Santa Cruz County.
okay, so the coast, farther north, right?
Yeah.
We go inland every once in a while to visit my mom. It's hot there.
Yeah. Anyone else? Allison, any questions? No questions? And also, let me ask you one more thing about, so you also went through a very different school system.
Yes.
And of course, you wouldn't necessarily know about this school system so much.
No.
But has this been, but you're teaching now, again, where are you teaching?
Well, right now I just give private lessons in my own studios. But yes, I came from Poland and I just jumped into deep end and I didn't know where I was.
Yeah.
So I was learning too.
Right.
Because I really didn't know how I should teach. In Poland we don't have community colleges at all.
Yeah.
So yes, the system was very different, but my students taught me a lot.
Good. Great.
Yes.
Okay, well, if nobody else has any other questions, then I'll just bring this to a close by thanking you, and to invite people, if they would feel more comfortable, you can ask Paulina a question after we break up and look around, and make sure you have taken a good look at her work. She'll be taking it down today, and it's really quite beautiful, so make sure you have a chance to take a look at it. Particularly, let me just say, look at the surface quality of the work. That's something that usually develops for students, develops rather later. First you're going to struggle with drawing and color and lighting, and there's a lot. I always say painting, there's a lot to do when you're painting. You're composing, you're drawing, you're thinking about light, you're thinking about shadows, you're thinking about color, you're thinking about color theory. There's a whole lot. And then one more thing that people, usually is one of the later things that people come to, is what does the actual physical paint look like in terms of variations of thickness and edge quality and stuff. That usually is kind of comes along as one of the later developments. So there's some beautiful examples of various ways that color paint is laid. I know for me personally, it was one of the things, it took me a really long time to even know what my teachers were talking about
Yes.
when they talk about the physicality of what the paint looks like. And I always think of it as, imagine you could turn a spigot and drain the color away. What would the physical texture of the painting look like without any color at all? And because that, you know, ultimately that should be interesting too.
Yes, that's what I do sometimes. Like in my phone, when I paint, I take pictures of my progress, and then I use filters to see what it looks like when it's just black and white. And then I see, is there balance? Is there no balance? Is one part heavier than the other? And what to do about it. So,
Great, that's a really good idea. That's a great idea. So take a look at these paintings, look at them closely. They're very rewarding. And if you think of any more questions, I'm sure that Paulina will be happy to answer you. So, but thanks, Paulina, for being here. Thank you for sharing your work with us. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. We really appreciate it. And